Greetings, everybody. My name is Michael Crandell. I'm CEO of Bitwarden, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Tomás Maldonado, CISO of the NFL, and Jeff Greene from CISA. I love that talk just now by Karen. I wish more people were friendly hackers in the world. And I think it's a great preface to our chat today. This is a kind of a fireside chat, so we don't have a fire going, but I hope you all get comfortable. I've got my Earl Grey tea here and looking forward to getting some pro tips from you, Tomás and Jeff. I noticed that Karen gave some props to CISA. We'll get into that in a moment. But to kick off, Tomás, all of us are fascinated with the NFL, particularly lately as certain celebrities have started attending certain games and even created more interest or a broader audience of interest. Can you share your journey and how you became CISO at the NFL and maybe a little bit about key experiences that helped shape your approach?
Sure. So first of all, thank you all for sort of having me and looking forward to our conversation. So it's good to meet you, Jeff, and good to see you again, Michael. My journey to the NFL, I always joke and say, the NFL has a combine, right? And they put their players through a combine and this rigorous sets of tests. Can you throw? Can you jump high? We do the same thing for a cyber, right? So they put me through that sort of cybersecurity combine, if you will. Now, look, joking aside, I think it's been specifically my 25 plus years of doing information security or cybersecurity, which is the new sexy term that we're calling it now. Spent 17 years in financial services, spent 11 years at Goldman, 4 at JPMorgan Chase, and a number of other years at other financial companies. Then went over to chemical manufacturing and had a CISO role there for about 4.5 years before I joined the NFL. And what I think what got me to the NFL, one was the power of the network that I have. And the other CISOs that I interact with. And the other aspect was the background that I have and the sort of pedigree around working in highly regulated and highly creative companies to be able to bring those skill sets and that knowledge and experience to the NFL, where we're not necessarily regulated by a regulatory body, but we're such a well-known brand. I always say we're regulated potentially by public opinion, right? Our brand is so powerfully known across the board. And so everything that we do from an information security and cybersecurity standpoint is to abide by and to align with any regulatory body that may come in and ask us questions if that were to be the case, which is not presently. I think that's my background in financial services that I can't pull away from, which I think is great. And then the creative side of working at a chemical manufacturing company in flavors and fragrances, where it allowed me to exercise implementing a security program to adapt and be agile for that particular environment, which is what we have here today. The NFL is an interesting organization. For those who don't know, I'm shocked that you're not all football fans, but for those who don't know, and as part of the league, you have a set of 32 clubs or NFL football teams. And those 32 clubs are spread across the United States, and they operate or they play their football games in 30 stadiums within the United States. And obviously we play internationally and we're growing more internationally. And I'm sure we'll get into that at some point in time. But that's my journey for me to the NFL. One interesting fun fact for you, Michael, just so that you can chew on this one. I have 96 board members. I don't know many CISOs that have to present to 96 board members, but I have 3 board members per club. There's 32 clubs. That's 96 people. So when I'm giving a board meeting, it could be a room full of 120 some odd people, give or take. So I'll pass it back over to you.
Wow. Tomás, first off, to be honest, that does not sound like a fun board meeting to me. So congrats on pulling that off, and congrats on making it through the combine up at the NFL. I'd love to. We'll look forward to getting more into detail, but it certainly sounds both super exciting and challenging. But giving a chance to our third participant in the chat, Jeff, you've got a long history in cybersecurity, and you've just recently risen to your appointment at CISA. Tell us a bit about your background.
Sure. First, though, I two things. I love the idea of the Cyber Combine. I could see us stealing that title potentially for some of the different exercises we do. So great little tip there. Also, thanks to Kieran for the shout out for Jack and Eva and the other great people we have at CISA. One of the things that has impressed me, seeing CISA is about a 5-year-old agency. There were some predecessor pieces, but the skill and talent we brought in that I see every day really impresses me. So my current role, I'm what's called the Executive Assistant Director over the Cybersecurity Division, or CSD, in the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure of Security Agency. So we're part of the Homeland Security Department, about 3,000 people total, I believe. There might be an old number in the agency, but we have a bunch of different mandates. I work on what I think is the best part, the cybersecurity piece, and we are responsible for a bunch of different parts. We're responsible for cybersecurity at the federal, civilian, executive branch agencies. Each agency has its own CISO, but we do set policy, and we have some authority in certain circumstances to give some directives. But we also work with the private sector. Critical infrastructure, cybersecurity is one of our key missions. I'll probably get into that a little bit. In terms of my background, I've been doing cybersecurity about 15 years. My only real technical training was in the 80s when I was a computer nerd playing on old Atari computers. Unfortunately, for my bank account, I gave that up when I went to college. Probably would have been a bit better off if I graduated in 1990 with a computer science degree. But I was a lawyer for a while, and I was working on the Hill, and got pulled into cybersecurity work in about 2009 when it was, from a policy standpoint, in its infancy. Tomás would know that it was a very real and active issue, information security, cybersecurity at that time. But from a policy perspective, it was really growing up. So I worked out on the Hill, and then I worked in the private sector at a cybersecurity company, running their policy and government engagement. Went back into government in about 2020 at the National Institute of Standards and Technology as the director of what's called the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. And a few weeks into this administration, I was put on detail to the White House, where I worked in the cybersecurity directorate, and essentially ran the defensive policy work for that directorate there for a bit. Left to go to a think tank, and about 4 or 5 months ago, was approached about the opportunity to run the cybersecurity division because there was some turnover, and jumped at it. And I've been in place just shy of 4 months, and it is the best job I've ever had, working with some of the best people and working on such an important mission. So really excited to get a chance to talk about it today.
Excellent. Well, welcome again, and so great to have you and the rest of the team at CISA pulling on behalf of the good guys. We need all the help we can get, for sure. Just before diving deeper, and to start with you, Tomás, I know you're relatively new at CISA, Jeff, but Tomás, I think you mentioned to me that there was some collaboration between the NFL and CISA in the past. Can you share a bit about that? What was that about, and how did it impact your work at NFL?
Sure. No, look, we leverage and work very closely with CISA in just about every state that we operate in, and as it pertains to our big Super Bowl events. So I've been at the league, it'll be 5 years for me in December. Prior to myself joining, my predecessor had a good collaboration with CISA as they were preparing for Super Bowl, and I've continued to grow that relationship that we have. So we meet with CISA, I want to say about 12 to 18 months in advance, with the actual state that we're going to be playing in. So we'll be playing the Super Bowl in New Orleans. For those who don't know, that'll be in February 2025. We've already been in constant contact with CISA in New Orleans, working through things like tabletop, getting not only the stadium, but also the surrounding small businesses that are part of that supply chain to fully appreciate and understand the services that CISA provides, right? So things like tabletop exercises, obviously the training and awareness campaign that's put out, but also a lot of the technical things like vulnerability scanning, vulnerability assessments, penetration tests, and the likes. So it's one of the tools, if you will, that I extensively exercise and leverage in my toolkit, which is making that connection with the local state and the local stadium with their CISA representatives, and we pulled them in very, very early on. So as we start to plan for the next year's Super Bowl, when we think about San Francisco in 2026, we're already making those connection and touch points with the CISA organization within San Francisco to start to plan with the stadium and the clubs the club in that location to start to plan accordingly, right? So that we can get ahead of the adversaries, right? Because when we think about cybersecurity and the threats that our venues face, our adversaries are trying to attack, obviously 24/7, 365 days a year. But it's not unlike physical security where you've got potential threats that may show up on the day of the game or maybe even the days leading up to the game. From a cybersecurity standpoint, it could be months in advance where adversaries are trying to make their way in or plan things into either the venue or even the supply chain, right? Things feeding the venue. That supply chain being like electrical power, energy, transportation, and all those other vehicles, if you will, or resources that support the actual event. And the one other thing that I'll say is the Super Bowl. When we think about Super Bowl is considered a Tier 1 event based on that designation is based upon DHS. And so Tier 1 is special event assessment rating of 1 being the highest. And to give you further context, that's putting into the same construct of like a presidential inauguration or an Olympics. And so there's a lot of not only scrutiny that we place upon the actual event and a lot of preparation that we place upon the event, but there's a ton of resources that are available to the state and to the region and to the actual venue by CISA and the other local government partners.
That's fascinating to me. So it's not just the NFL organization and maybe the stadium and CISA, but it's even a whole perimeter of surrounding businesses and small businesses that get involved. Do you have any idea if I were a small business, if I were a donut shop nearby, what might my experience be? What kind of help would I be getting from CISA, either of you?
Jeff, you want to take that?
Sure. I mean, that was a great pitch for some of our services. I mean, once this video is live, I may go pull that down. So we offer a variety of services, the vulnerability scanning, the attack surface management. There are different tools that can fit for different size entities. Some of the simplest that we can do, and these are free services that anyone can sign up for, we'll essentially do a public scan of your public-facing websites, browsers, devices. And what we're looking for is vulnerabilities that we know criminals or other adversaries will exploit, and we will generate a report for you. We also have a series of what are called cyber performance goals. Those are some baseline security measures that any critical infrastructure entity, but frankly, any entity with a public-facing business should take. You can download that, do a free assessment, and that'll give you some ideas on how you can improve your security. But to Tomas's point, we have cybersecurity advisors and also what we call protective security advisors in every state who can engage with you depending upon your threat profile. If you're an energy sector, your entity, you're more likely to be under target than the donut shop. But even the donut shop, you're most likely dealing with credit cards, customer data, personal information. Doing those basic vulnerability scans are essential. The same thing with protecting against ransomware. A ransomware attack can put a family donut shop out of business just as badly as it could a larger institution. So we do provide those types of bespoke services. We also have other things that hopefully you'll never hear from us. We have a ransomware pre-notification initiative. So we have a variety of different sources of information, public, non-public. If we have an understanding or a belief that an entity is either under attack right now, the bad guys on their networks, or we know they're being targeted, we'll reach out directly and say, hey, you need to take care of X, you need to take care of Y. So we'll do that service. I think we've done, it was over 800 in the first quarter of this year. So that's a huge volume of attacks. It's the proverbial dog that didn't bite. We were able to prevent a lot of attacks. The other part we do is vulnerability scanning I touched on before. We keep track of how a lot of these ransomware actors are getting on network, what they're doing. And if we see that you have those vulnerabilities exposed, we can reach out to you and say, you have the front door open. You need to close that door. Here's some suggestions, some resources on how you can do that.
Fantastic. I got to follow up on that, since most of that or all of it is free. Where can somebody go? If those who are listening or listening to a recording later, where can somebody go to find out more about that, Jeff?
Best place to start is CISA.gov. You'll see the links on there that can take you in. We have our Joint Cyber Defense Collective, which also does a lot of our outreach as well. You can go to the JCDC website, also linked there on CISA.gov.
Fantastic.
CISA, CISA.
CISA, thanks. So another topic I wanted to touch on, which I know concerns both of you, those who are listening from larger organizations, bigger companies. You mentioned, Tomás, that the NFL operates as an organization of organizations. You've got the 32 clubs and the NFL is an umbrella, and they're each independent companies or independent operations to some extent. What specific challenges and opportunities does that structure present? And then after you, Tomás, I know that's something that you deal with also, Jeff. So kick us off, Tomás, on the organization of organizations.
Yeah, for us, I'll call it the opportunities that we get to work through is that most of the clubs, in addition to football, they have other businesses and other business lines that they operate, right? They're owners, they are entrepreneurs, very successful entrepreneurs in their own right, and they have multiple businesses, football being one of the key ones that I essentially align to because we're at the league. So we would, to a certain extent, we would regulate the clubs and the stadiums for their football side of their business. But the security practices and protocols and program that we have designed, right? So we're aligning to the NIST cybersecurity framework. We're ensuring that we're making use of all of the governmental services that are available to us because we're part of critical infrastructure, right? In that commercial facilities designation. We ensure that those organizations understand and appreciate those services, not only that the league can provide them, but also that they can get locally from the state government. But those opportunities that are presented to us are opportunities for us to help them not only do better in their football business, but also extend to the rest of their businesses. And sometimes their businesses may apply to within their sort of local municipalities to some of the small, medium-sized businesses. So you'll see a trickle-down effect to the security program that may actually impact in a positive way their other sort of interests and assets, if you will. But that presents a challenge for us in terms of prioritization and the likes. And so we work very extensively, obviously, with the local club and stadiums to help prioritize what needs to get implemented first, second, third, with a risk-based approach so that they can understand, how they're able to take the telemetry, the information around what are the threats that they're facing and what are the threats that we're facing collectively as an organization so that they can then start to apply controls to mitigate those risks over time. So I don't usually call them challenges. I usually call them opportunities for us to help improve, opportunities for us to help add value to the business, and opportunities for us to continue to enable the business to continue to take risk in a very calculated way by making sure that they're managing that risk over time.
Got it. And Jeff, share your thoughts about organization of organizations in the security landscape with us.
And I want to pick up on the opportunities theme because there are some very real opportunities in order to protect all of us when you have this organization of organizations. So if you think about the federal civilian executive branch, all the big civilian agencies, that's one piece. Everyone has their own CISO. We at CISA have overall responsibility, the capacity to issue what are called binding operational directives in specific circumstances. But within each agency, they are not monolithic. I'm part of Department of Homeland Security. We have CISA, we have TSA, we have FEMA, we have Coast Guard. We have Secret Service, but we also have headquarters elements. So all of them have their own mission. They need different operational requirements. They have different functions that they need. So it is important to have some baseline of what the security is, but also the ability to see across. And when I talk about a big opportunity, one of the things we learned after the SolarWinds compromise, which was discovered in late 2020, we were working on it when I got to the White House. What we found after the fact was individual agencies had seen individual events that were part of this campaign, but we didn't see enough because we didn't have enough endpoint detection and response technology deployed, and we didn't correlate the events we saw. So in the years since then, we have made incredible progress in deploying EDR at 60 plus different federal agencies and entities. And then we at CISA can pull back that data and perform analysis on it do a number of things. One is if we see an obvious event, most often something that's pretty obvious, EDR is picked up, the agency has seen, but we can connect those proverbial dots across agencies. And we have been able to use our data access in recent years and months to detect malicious activity that actually evaded some of the most sophisticated endpoint specific tools. So it didn't hit on this particular EDR, but when you put it together with the other data we were seeing, we're like, this isn't right. And so we stopped some of what we consider as the next generation attacks, because our sophisticated adversaries know how good this modern EDR is, and they're looking for ways to evade it. So we have in place tools to try to go where we think they're going. As Wayne Gretzky said, we're trying to go where the puck is. But the opportunity we have from having these different agencies who face different adversaries, face the same adversaries, but are attacked differently, we are able to take those bits of data and correlate them and see across the breadth of it. And that has been a huge help. We're still developing it. We're not perfect, but the difference from 2021, early 2021, when I was in the White House and we were figuring out what do we do post-SolarWinds, and what I see today, our capacity to secure these federal agencies, to see these next generation attacks, is night and day. And it is, we have taken that potential weakness of the organization or organizations and found a way to take some strength and some defensive capabilities out of it.
That's great. That's great. I have to mention, in my recollection of the SolarWinds incident, one aspect of it was an incredibly simple password that an intern had been using, which leads right into the next question. Taking a step back from a more corporate or business orientation, but very foundationally, with all our security technology, human error remains one of the top causes of breaches. I think in the Verizon data breach report for this year, they mentioned that 68% of breaches related in one way or another back to social engineering, phishing, things like that. What strategies can we use to encourage people and organizations to adopt the better practices that do exist out there? Tomás, why don't you lead us off on that one?
Yeah, look, I think there's some aspect of what we need to focus in on, and what I specifically try to drive with my team, and that's fundamentals around education and awareness of the types of threats that we're facing as an organization, or that individuals may be facing in their personal lives, right? So I look at it as, most people will be like, our staff are our weakest links or the likes. I like to think of it as our staff are our greatest assets, right? So if I have 5,000 people at my organization or 15,000 people at my organization, I potentially have 15,000 security people. If I can touch them, reach them, make them a little bit more educated in cybersecurity, they may be good canaries, if you will, or they may be good advocates to implementing controls, or evangelists to evangelizing the controls and spreading the word and saying, hey, that's not the right thing to do, or don't click on that link, or no, I don't want to spread that chain letter, if there's still people still doing chain letters these days. But those are individuals that can actually help you, right, and help be that sort of really be that first line of defense. Because they're the ones interacting with systems. They're the ones creating data. They're the ones logging in. They're the ones sending and manipulating information. And, there's only so much that we can do as security professionals to empower them with the right level of tools and capabilities. And I think that big tool and capability is education and awareness around, those types of threats. So I usually focus in on trying to train and educate people and making things more personal. Right, because my thought is, if I can help an individual be more secure in their personal life, chances are that'll resonate with them for when they transfer to our corporate life. Right, no, the CEO is not going to send you a text message in the middle of the night saying, "Hey, can you send me a gift card because I need to pay a bill," or what have you. No, you're a new employee. You just updated your LinkedIn and you got a message from Roger Goodell saying, hey, call me, I can't talk. It's not going to happen. So we need to try to educate individuals to be a little bit more aware of those types of psychological attacks on them, because people are very forthcoming and giving and want to do the right thing. And the adversaries know how to abuse that, right? The other thing we try to also hone in on is, we're still in a world where we rely heavily on username and password to log into systems. We try to shift from passwords to passphrases, right? Making it longer and stronger so that it's a little bit more difficult for an adversary to guess or even a technology system to crack, but also make it easier for an individual to remember. So you can make a passphrase of 18 to 20 something characters if you want, right? Mix it in with numbers, letters, and special characters. And now you have a stronger actual password that'll protect your system from an adversary being able to hack it, right? And we spend a lot of time, again, on the education. And then when we sort of need to provide more capabilities, that's when we do a lot more with our investments in security and security technology and our overall security stack to be able to remove and minimize what actually gets to our users so that they're not making the wrong decision because they were busy thinking about something else and they clicked on a link. So removing phishing emails, removing unwanted data that's hitting their inbox, and also limiting where, if they were to actually click something, limiting where they actually can get to by implementing the right level of web filtering really goes a long way to knocking out some of those, I'll call it very basic and almost mass attacks that we're seeing where, adversaries are very lazy. And you can quote me on that. They're sharing an attack to the masses. And if they send that out to 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 people and they get 1% of the users to click, submit their credential, or even open up an attachment and install malware, for them, that's success, right? For us, that's a failure, and we need to work through that, and it kicks in a whole bunch of incident response processes. But for an adversary, that's all they need to do to accomplish their mission. So we try to minimize that, educate our users, help them make right decisions when they're actually interacting with systems and data and information, so that way they'll be better protected in the long run.
Well, amen to that about passphrases. My favorite is, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die, which I don't use, by the way, but it just shows how a long one can be very easy to remember. And what team members at Bitwarden tend to get is fake text from me saying, I'm in a webinar, could you help me transfer some money? And, pretty patently obvious, but as these get more sophisticated, Jeff, turning to you, how do you feel about this notion of turning from weakest link to greatest asset in terms of people?
So I loved what Tomás said about if you help people understand how to apply security controls in their personal life, how to protect their bank account, social media, whatever, they can transfer those skills and knowledge almost unthinkingly to work. It's a fantastic approach. Technology, multi-factor authentication is key. But all of that is focusing on the short-term problem, which we need to do. There is a longer-term fundamental problem. The first cybersecurity conference I went to was in 2009, and I still remember one piece of it clearly, and it had nothing to do with substance. I saw some guy walking around with a T-shirt that said, "There's no patch for a stupid user." And I thought, well, that's really funny. And it still is a little funny, but it is coming at this problem precisely backwards. The problem is not that people are going to click on links. The problem is not that 1 in 1,000 people are going to believe, Michael, it is you texting during that webinar. The problem is we are relying on technology every day and in every possible way that is fundamentally defective. We talk about vulnerabilities, but we need to think about it as a defect. The fact that an adversary can take that human frailty. I am as paranoid as you're going to get. I'm a lawyer by training. I've worked in the government. I've worked in the security space. Once a year, if not more often, as my fingers coming up, I realize, what did I just click on? We should not be living in an environment where that momentary mistake can lead to emptying my bank account, stealing national security secrets, taking down our critical infrastructure. And that's happening because the software, the technology we rely on is built insecurely. So short term, we need to do all the things that we've talked about. Longer term, we need to change how this technology is built. We are essentially buying cars that we know have critical, fatal vulnerabilities built into them that we don't know about, that a bad guy is looking for, and that the manufacturer may or may not fix depending upon how the previous quarter went. We need to get to a place where we are building this technology securely from the front end minimizing the capacity, the ability of the adversary to take a human frailty and turn that into a massive compromise. So to wrap up, do everything that Tomás talked about. We do it at CISO. We do internal phishing. We have lots of resources to help people figure out how to use multi-factor authentication. We also need to be focusing on the long term, addressing the fundamental flaws in our technology ecosystem.
I think this may be what you referred to me in our pre-brief call as security by design.
Yes. Yeah. So my boss, Director Usuli, has pushed aggressively an initiative we have called Secure by Design. We have over 200 companies that have signed up to our Secure by Design pledge. And in very simple commitments in there, things like using multi-factor authentication, reporting known vulnerabilities, having a system to detect them, no default usernames and passwords. If your device comes with a username and password that is even a complex one, if it is default, that's probably going to be in a user manual. That's going to be out there in the public. You would be better off changing that complex password to password, because an adversary, a bad guy, is going to just spam the entire internet trying to use that username and password together. So we have 200 companies that have pledged to do it, and we're moving forward aggressively and trying to get some results. And one thing I'll flag in terms of how we're seeing results in ways that people might not expect to be positive, we are seeing an uptick in some companies that have taken the pledge in the vulnerabilities they're reporting. And that's fundamentally a good thing, because that means they're looking for their vulnerabilities, they're finding them before the bad guys do, and then they're fixing them. And finally, it suggests to us that they're also putting in place much more secure development practices. So I encourage everyone to check out the Secure by Design pledge. And you as purchasers, as the consumer, build security into your thinking. Let's create a demand signal at these technology providers that they should be putting security in, because that's what their customers want.
Thank you. Totally agree there. Totally agree. Let me touch for a second on change. We had the friendly hacker talk about the only constant is change. And certainly we're in a very fast changing technology world. What do you see that's evolving in the security landscape? Let's start with you, Tomás, for the NFL. But what's evolving in terms of the security threat landscape that's new and different?
Look, I think it's almost obvious with with a lot of the innovation that we're seeing with artificial intelligence or generative AI and that sort of becoming more mainstream, if you will. Right? For those computer scientists like myself, who studied artificial intelligence school many years ago, it's not new. But for the average majority of people who are not so close to technology, this is a new and incredible phase that they're in, right? All the movies that we saw years ago of robots sort of doing certain things, it's all coming to life, if you would, to a certain extent, or at least in people's mind and in their perception. And in actual practical terms, there are those steps to innovation that you're seeing and that we're taking. So I think the fast pace as to how artificial intelligence, generative AI specifically, has not only taken a hold on society. I think that's one of the things that we need to, as security practitioners, as legal experts, and as every regulatory bodies and everyone in between, to start to really look at that and make sure that we think about what Jeff just mentioned around that secure by design, that trust by design, and all of those specific guardrails to implement that within the technology. We are, not to get too philosophical here, but if you think about what moves and motivates companies, specifically publicly traded companies, it's usually every 3 months trying to report good earnings. Well, when they try to report good earnings, it's because they're probably trying to release a new product, a new technology, a new service offering. When you do that in an every 3 month basis, and you're trying to push that sort of that incentive, if you will, to be able to keep your stock price up or please your shareholders and the likes, you're bound to have errors in there because people are going too fast. They're developing code too fast. There's not an incentive for developers in school to learn how to do security in their code. There's an incentive for them to figure out how to code very quickly to be able to release a product to the marketplace. So I think we need to shift the mindset and shift that paradigm and really start to reward those companies that are implementing security in their products, releasing those products, hitting their marks, but also making sure that they're protecting the information of individuals, and they're taking the best steps to ensure that we're protecting. I don't want to say protecting society as a whole, but start with your own product first, and then that'll develop a chain effect, and then you start to see society protected as a whole, if you will. So I think the fast pace of AI is a real good opportunity for us to really think about how are we actually creating solutions to be either innovative in companies, in a way of helping our business, our sort of customers do more with our service offerings, or even helping internal people find efficiencies. But ultimately, how are we ensuring that we're implementing security in that paradigm, in the right guardrails, to protect the trust and the safety of the technology as we develop it, is going to be very important for us. So I think that's one of the things that I'll say that we're seeing. That's, again, it's not new because we've chatted about it for the past couple of years, but the fast pace of all of these new technologies that are coming out that have some sort of generative AI association with it, I think that's probably the piece that we need to stay ahead of. And then the adversaries are clearly looking at this technology. No longer is the day of you having to worry about whether you were going to get an email from, that said a Nigerian prince or whatever, right? Or look for spelling errors. Now you can go into, these open platforms, type in a message and say, hey, write this in the language of German, write this in the language of Spanish or Japanese or Chinese, and it'll translate it almost 100% accurately. And now you've got an active attack that you can send or launch towards an individual or even a company. So I think we need to really, spend a lot more time, obviously leverage the innovation where it makes sense, and also leverage the innovation to help us stay ahead of the adversaries to protect our organizations.
I think that's a great nugget there, that we should focus in on recognizing and rewarding companies that do good security, and not just financial performance that's strong until it isn't, because something happens that wasn't prepared for. I think that's a great point. Discussions and news about security often get pretty somber, Jeff, and pretty negative, and we tend to highlight the latest breach and the latest tragedy and disaster. Could you share what some success stories that you've seen in terms of improving security or avoiding problems? I think you have a special perch and view into that in your role.
Sure. For me, some of the ransomware notifications I've talked about have been great to see how we're able to lean forward and help companies before they get compromised. I think what I talked about within the federal civilian executive branch, how the FSEP, as we call it, how we've been able to take a deployment of technology and then federate that across the enterprise and use that to detect malicious activity that we otherwise wouldn't see. That has been great. The uptake on the Secure by Design pledge has been terrific. Now, we're looking to see how that pans out. But I mean, you touched on something essential in my mind. And when I used to give talks when I was at a cybersecurity company, I was very worried that people didn't understand the risk. So I would lean into the scary side. And feedback I got afterward was people felt actually disillusioned. So what I wrapped up with, and what I want to leave folks here with today for sure, is that we are all empowered to improve the security of our own life, our own digital life, and our companies. That, as scary as it seems, most of the attacks out there are not that sophisticated. Tomás is 100% right. Most of the criminal attackers are lazy. They did not go into crime to work hard. They're taking advantage of known existing exploits and vulnerabilities. So if you as an individual or you as a small business do the simple things, patch and update, have security tools installed, multi-factor authentication, you will be ahead of most of the attackers. Now, if you have a sophisticated nation state coming at you, that is different. But many of us, thankfully, are not going to be in that position. So really important for me that people understand that you can do simple things and make yourself secure from most of the attacks out there.
Thanks, Jeff. And gentlemen, I think we're coming to a wrap here. So on behalf of Bitwarden and the whole Open Source Security Summit, it's been a delightful chat, and I think very enlightening for our listeners and for me. So thanks a million for joining us today, and wish you all Godspeed in your security efforts moving forward.